All right, we're here now. Fantasy collector designer Kit Rae. Kit, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, Kit, some of your work has been influenced by some varied artists, as Frank Frazetta, Michael Whalen, and Jim Burns. Now, can you tell us about how these artists or others have influenced some of your design and why?
A lot of those artists are artists that I grew up with as a child, seeing their artwork on album covers, book covers, and I don't know if it didn't really influence my design aesthetic much. It's more just the feeling of the universe that those artists created. That's what got me into this.
Okay.
Just thinking about weapons in the sword and sorcery fantasy universe. That's really just the spark that got me into this.
Okay. All right. Well, are there any other methods of inspiration that really assist you in how you're designing a piece or collection?
It varies. A lot of my early designs were sparked just from my interest in historical weapons, which is what I started in. That's really what I first started designing.
Okay.
And the fantasy end of it made me want to take those and just twist them into that world.
Yeah, it's pretty much sort of a niche that you've got now. That's pretty much what you focus on solely now. You really don't do any historical pieces anymore, correct?
Not under my brand, no.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty much just whatever fits into my little universe I've created here.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, one of your more recent swords, I believe it's the Sedethul sword?
Sedethul.
The Sedethul sword. Now, where did the inspiration for that design come from?
That's actually a design that's been around probably about 15 years. I'll design dozens of swords every month. Okay. Or different weapon designs, and then I'll go through them when it comes time to figure out what the next release is going to be. And I was going through some old designs, and just that one just jumped out at me that I never got made, and it's always one I wanted to get made.
Okay.
So it's started off as being a more or less functional piece, and then I started putting my little flares with it around the handguard.
And you actually have two different styles for that. You've got a gold edition, correct?
Right. There's the gold limited edition for my collectors that like the gold versions, and the standard version. Okay.
All right. Well, often you also include artwork with these pieces that sort of go along with it, with a specific sword or spear. Tell us about your favorite piece.
Favorite piece of artwork?
Well, the favorite sword, or if it's different, the favorite piece of artwork that you might have.
My favorite sword is always. It's usually whatever the new one is.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's the one I've got all my time invested in at the moment. So, but one of my favorites in the past, I like the first two. The Sword of Darkness is still one of my favorites.
Okay.
Mithrodin Sword has always been one of my favorites, and that's one of the collector's favorites. I hear more comments about that sword than any of the other ones.
Well, why is that one? Is it because it was your first that that's your favorite, or is there a specific reason to the design?
I think that's another one that was an older design that we never made because it looked a little bit too Middle Eastern for the time.
Okay.
Then Lord of the Rings came out, and the Elvish weapons sort
and you
of
had a handle
popularized
and all that.
Well, I did. I supervised all the replicas for the Cutlery's Lord of the Rings line.
Right.
But that sort of made that design, that look, okay, because instead of being Middle Eastern, then now it's Elvish. So I think that had a lot to do with it, because as soon as that came out, the type of comments that I would hear people talked about that being something that looks like it came right out of Lord of the Rings.
Right, about how similar the two are.
Yeah, okay. That curved blade style.
Now, with one specific design, how long does it usually take you to develop that?
It varies. Sometimes something comes down in 5 minutes. Sometimes I'll work on something for months and months, just playing around with different variations on shapes, cutting models out, doing sculptures. It just varies from piece to piece. The most recent one, Sedethul.
Right.
Like I said, that was an older design, but the design was actually just a little thumbnail sketch. It probably took me 5 minutes to do when I initially thought of it.
Sort of like you just sort of have an aha moment with it.
Okay. And I'm the type of person that I always have something to draw with me wherever I am, and if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's something in my head, that I'm drawing that down on a Post-it note.
And if it's not made clear, you actually draw and all of the poster artwork with it as well.
Yeah, the artwork started out with the first two swords. I was always an artist. That's just my hobby.
Right.
And I did a lot of fantasy art. I was always drawing weapons when I was younger, and I wanted to figure a way to incorporate that into my sword line.
Okay.
So we needed a marketing piece for the first two swords, and I always have in the back of my head what the background mythology is on the sword, because when you sit there and you're drawing up CAD drawings for a product, or you're doing sculpturing for a handguard,
right,
something that takes you weeks, plenty of time for my brain to think of what the background is on these. So I started writing these down, and initially just started off to be something we would put in the brochure for the first 2 swords.
Right.
And then I thought, well, we could do the art print with this as well. So, I had already put those swords in a painting, so pitched that idea to the guys at United, and they liked it. One thing led to another, and that's just a regular part of my line now.
And now, actually, those pictures go along with the story, which is on your website, right?
Yeah, it started with the artwork, and then people want to know what's going on in the painting. So I did a couple paragraphs of the background mythology of what is happening in the painting and how that relates to the swords.
Right.
And that's just grown into a big monster. It's like a 90-page story now.
And that's actually
about 10,000 years.
It's all completely on your website, the entire storyline.
Yeah, the entire story is on the website. When you buy one of the swords, there's a certificate of authenticity, and on the back side of that is a summary of that mythology, and it's a brief excerpt of what's on the website. But, But you also get that when you buy the sword for the people that are interested in it. There's all background on all the pieces.
All right. Well, you mentioned Tolkien a minute ago, because you're actually working with the Lord of the Rings pieces, and you say that Frank Herbert and Tolkien are actually big influences for you. How exactly did those authors influence you? Was it with your writing, or was it with
Tolkien, obviously, because of the made-up fantasy universe,
right?
And just the depth of his writing, it's hard to believe after you read The Lord of the Rings that universe doesn't exist somewhere, because he's covered every minute detail that it builds that whole world in your head as a believable world. And Frank Herbert did the same thing in Dune, which is technically that's a science fiction book. That's how it gets categorized.
Right.
But it's really in the same vein. They're using archaic weapons. They're using swords and daggers in that story, and just all that just mixing around in my head as a youth is what got me into this.
Right.
And when it came time to do the mythology, obviously Tolkien was a inspiration for the mythology and the backstory on the swords.
Right.
Because I had that rich tapestry of all that information that he created to draw from, plus whatever was in my own imagination, and that sort of inspired the storyline. Like, I have elves in my story, just like Tolkien has elves in his story.
Well, now I've got to ask you. I mean, because I'm probably going to get comments if I don't. But you worked on Lord of the Rings, and are you working on The Hobbit?
We are working on The Hobbit.
Okay, all right.
United Cutlery secured the license for that, and they still have the Lord of the Rings license.
Of course, yeah. Now, but you specifically, you're actually working on some of the pieces.
Yeah. What I do is the pieces are already designed by Weta Workshop and all their great design team, and we basically reverse engineer those. Try to figure a way to make a semi-production version that anybody can go and buy, and that's what we did on the Lord of the Rings line. Right,
and you can probably talk about a little bit of that here today, maybe some of the pieces, or I don't know if you have the ability about what are you doing exactly?
There's obviously a lot of secrecy around what they're doing, and they don't want us to reveal what's being done. But a few things that have already been talked about in public we can talk about. Obviously, there's most of the characters are dwarves. The pictures of those have already been released.
Yeah, we actually put those on a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Well, we're doing most of those weapons. You can see in those photos.
And
a lot that you can't see.
Gandalf, maybe, or maybe the elves.
Everybody knows Gandalf has a staff in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
So we will be doing Gandalf staffs.
Okay, and maybe some elves stuff you want
to. We're already getting questioned about that, about what the elven weapons look like. People know Legolas is returning for both of these films.
Right.
Which, in case people don't know, there are 2 films.
Right, 2 films for The Hobbit.
Coming out a year apart, starting in December of next year.
Right.
People know Legolas is in the film, so we're already asked, does Legolas have the same knives, the same bow that he had in the first film? I can't answer that.
So they basically don't say no comment things?
Yeah, I can tell you he does have knives, and we're working on those. A lot of things we haven't even seen yet because the design work is not finished.
Okay.
And a lot of the elven material we haven't seen yet. What I have seen is very interesting. That's about all I can say about it.
All right, so guys, I don't want to hear the complaints. I've tried to get it out of them. This is about as far as I can get with them so far. So, all right.
They want it all to remain a surprise for people.
Okay. Well, that's it.
All I can tell you is what I've seen is very cool, and it's it's going to be a worthy follow-up. This is a prequel, but this is a worthy follow-up to the Lord of the Rings line that we've done.
I tell you, I'm excited about it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's get away from Lord of the Rings a little bit. You also do a complete line, or you do completely tactical pieces like throwing knives and things like that. Is that right?
Actually, long before the fantasy work started, that's what I did in this industry, is work on functional knives, folding knives, hunting knives, sporting knives. That's basically what I started with.
Right.
And I slowly pushed that, at least as far as my brand, pushed that into the fantasy area. But I still kept doing the tactical pieces, and I've always loved throwing knives since I was a kid. And I've had a throwing knife line under my brand for a few years.
Right, yeah.
And throwing axes as well. And
you actually brought a prototype to one, right?
Yeah, there's four different throwing knife patterns that are coming out, and I'm also coming out with a new axe, and that's the prototype of it.
Okay.
That we're looking at today.
Pretty sweet. Now this is just a prototype, so this is not the final or what it looks like.
Very close to the final production piece.
Guys, this thing is awesome. I mean, if you could just put this thing in your hand, it just looks like it's going to basically take my whole arm off. It's just sweet.
And they're a blast to throw. That's one of my favorite recreational hobbies.
Sweet. Just
to get away from the drawing and the CAD and the sculpting and all that.
Right. So basically,
go outside and throw some steel at a wood board.
That's what these awesome. For. Sweet. And okay, well, cool. All right. Now, you also mentioned that your artwork contains some possibly up-and-coming pieces. Is that correct? Sort of
usually in the background of the paintings, you can see other pieces that sometimes they're pieces that were already made. Sometimes they're pieces that haven't been made.
Right.
And we always look at that whenever a new piece comes out. Someone will look at one of the paintings, and sometimes I want to make one of the pieces that you see in the paintings that hasn't been made. But a lot of time, I just take my cues from the fans, from the collectors. Just look at my emails. I always get asked if there's a weapon in a painting that is not something that is in my line, if we're going to make it. So I kind of look at that and see how many requests I get for a certain piece, and that doesn't have an influence on what I do now.
And it's a pretty cool bonus. I mean, you're already getting a storyline here. So you've got something there. You've got a picture to go with the storyline, so you got the replica from that. But then you also have sort of a little hint in each picture. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right.
Like the current Ellexdrow spear that's in my line that came out this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the spear that was in one of the other paintings, but that was a direct result of people asking for a spear because they saw that spear in one of the previous paintings.
Right. So you actually listen to the comments. You actually see what the people are saying, and you actually work on that. That's pretty sweet. All right. Well, Kit, Billy, that's about all the time we've got today, and we do appreciate the opportunity for you to be here on the vBlog. We look forward to the new throwing knives that are coming out, the Hobbit pieces that will be coming out in a year or two from now. Sweet, and we appreciate it.
No problem. Good to be here.
All right. And you can check out Kit's work on BudK.com this week on the vBlog page, or you can simply search the Kit Rae on the BudK search. And also, don't forget, check out Kit's website, which is on the screen now. Kit, we do appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks.